Welcome back to the Culture Fit podcast. Remember, I'm Vincent, here's Victor, and one day we're going to run away and start a circus together. Episode 1, we started on 0. The theme of today is arriving and just settling in Australia at a very high level. A few months ago, we wrote an article which is a list of 50 things that you need to know when you have just arrived in Australia. Of those 50 things, we've grouped them into 12 categories. And what I'd like to do in today's first segment is go through one key item in each category. So we're not going to cover all 50. I would love if you can read the article, which is in the description. Before we start, Vic, you've spoken to a lot of international students. Are there any key concerns that they have or any of the key topics that we're about to cover that, based on your experience, you've heard a lot of people talk about?
I mean, as you may know, we run in conjunction with the New South Wales government, the airport welcome desk at the Sydney airport, as well as the Newcastle airport. So we've met quite a few thousand international students in our time. Other than the factual, information-seeking questions that we get, we've seen a trend of students who are looking for ways to meet people, or just for something social, something they can do once they've settled down into the accommodation. Right. So I think most of the students nowadays are pretty good with getting home and setting up shop, but after that it's like, okay, well, orientation week doesn't start for another 2 weeks. What's there to do?
Yeah.
And how can I meet people? So I'm sure we'll come across that a bit later, but yeah, that's probably the main thing that doesn't get addressed in a lot of the top 50 of this, or here's a guide to settle in. It's no one help you make friends.
Yeah. Let's go through the list. There are 12 categories, and I'm going to put a thing in front of the camera now where this is the first category, and there should be a number of items there. We are going to talk about, first and foremost, arranging airport pickup. We have a student welcome desk at Sydney Airport, which is sponsored by the New South Wales government, as well as a number of universities and colleges and whatnot. And we also work with To Airport as well, which is a transport service. But if you don't choose to use those services, that's totally fine. The important thing is having some transport service that you can rely on at the airport. Because if you've never been to Sydney Airport, sometimes it's a little confusing.
Yeah, look, I mean, Sydney Airport, in relative terms, is the busiest airport in Australia. So we know there's probably about 150,000 international students that go through that airport every year. And then with citizens and visitors and tourists on top. So, look, it is daunting. I think the last count I had was there's 11 ways to get out of the airport.
Yeah.
In terms of transportation, but that's precisely why the welcome desk exists. We understand that most of you have traveled a long way to get here, often the first time that you ever travel by yourself internationally. So if you're kind of not quite sure how to get home and you haven't booked anything, then the best place to start is actually come to our welcome desk, so that your fellow international students can, find out where you're actually going and make some recommendations on whether it's Uber or Didi or taxi or coaches, buses, trains.
We're not sponsored by any of those companies.
Yeah, but it's there's quite a few ways to get there.
Even if it's a 3-minute conversation, if you can find it within yourself to get enough energy to drag yourself over there, that definitely helps. Let's move on to the second one. So the second one is under the category of health and insurance. Swipe here. Number 7 is activate the overseas healthcare. It's important to consider 2 things. One, when you arrive here, it doesn't automatically kick into gear. You do have to activate it. And secondly, a lot of these more basic plans don't cover things like dental and optical and a lot of the, what in Australian terms is known as extras.
Yeah. I think, look, the best way to explain it is for basic, going to a family doctor or someone who can help you diagnose what your illness may be. That's the coverage you're going to get from your overseas healthcare insurance. anything beyond that, so specialist, hospital, I mean, that's questionable depending on which plan you're in. But in Australia, unlike in some of your home countries, a lot of things are classified as extras, and therefore you might want to check your policy to see whether it includes, things like dental, optical, etc. before you kind of proceed, because it does make a huge difference on cost and on waiting list and on who you can access. It's just a different system. It's not better or worse. I know that in Asia it's kind of pay as you go, most of the time, but here a lot of people are incentivized to have a health insurance that aligns with their needs, so that they can then offset the cost of insurance by utilizing those services over time. So I think for me, like you said, activation is one key. The other one is finding a medical center near you that hopefully you can trust, or someone that can speak your language. A lot of the medical centers here are full and they don't accept new patients anymore. So therefore, it's good to call around and go, hey, look, I'm a new international student. I'm not sick yet. You probably don't want to look at that when you're sick. You want to do that, have that phone call beforehand and just go, look, I'm a new patient here. Can I come to you? Are you guys full? And then after that, you can talk about the insurance extras a bit later. That's when you've settled in and you're like, oh, I need a new pair of glasses. I wouldn't necessarily go out and pay retail without some kind of coverage.
Yeah, especially with the exchange rates. The other thing is, in Australia, once you go outside of the main hospital, within 1 or 2 k's of the hospital, generally you go to an independent doctor, general practitioner, GP, and then they are the ones who tend to serve that local community in that suburb. So in every given suburb, which maybe 20, 30, 40,000 people, you would have a number of GPs,
Correct.
something like that. And as Vic, you mentioned earlier, with a medical center, that may be a slightly larger suburb, slightly denser suburb, where there might be a number of these doctors in one place. It's like I guess a law firm or an accounting firm where they kind of all work together.
They cover the local area,
Yeah.
and then they have specialists that they know each other of, so that if you need to escalate your case, then they'll refer you.
Yeah.
So again, it's a very different system because we just don't have that kind of density of population.
Cool. All right. Things to consider. Moving on. Third category. A swipe here. Study preparations. I remember.
A little while ago.
Yeah, a little while ago.
Yeah.
I remember there was one semester where I was just not thinking too hard and I had a bunch of subjects. And so I went out, I looked at the course materials, like, okay, I needed to buy these books. And I bought the books. I didn't particularly care for the subject. I didn't really study that hard. I passed the subject, but I did not open the books at all. And the books were like $400. So I finally used that experience to help you, right? So what I'm trying to say is, if your immediate response is, okay, I gotta go out and buy that material, maybe you don't have to. Maybe you don't need the textbook. Maybe you can borrow it from the library. Maybe there is a secondhand version that's one edition older. But instead of paying $150, you might only pay 40, right? And sometimes there might be Facebook groups or other groups online where someone might say, hey, I just did this course. If you want it, I'll give it to you for a half price. Or if they're nice enough, maybe less. If you can do that, that'll save you so much money every semester.
I think the starting point should be when you know which courses you're doing, which subjects you're doing, to have a look at the course structure and what's the recommended text. I don't think the cost of textbooks has decreased any time.
It's probably gone up.
It's probably gone up, right? So
Yeah.
that $500 might actually be $800 now. But
Yeah.
I think what we do normally see is a lot of people buy new stuff at the very beginning of the degree, and then gradually they realize what you can skim on, what you just need a few pages, whatever. So if you have the time and the diligence to actually go and look at the coursework and go, oh, throughout the whole subject, there's only really been 3 reference points for a book. Well, you don't need the textbook. Maybe you can borrow it, or maybe you get a second-hand one. Yeah. But I know there are some subjects that literally go through the book, the textbook chapter by chapter, and you can't really skim on that. And even with different editions, publishers are quite smart too. They would change and the order of the chapters, and before you know what, you have no idea what's referenced, right? So I think the main one is, I would say start with being frugal, look for secondhand. I mean, most textbooks are in pretty good condition even after one or two people have used
Yeah.
it,
Well,
right? So you don't need the absolute best, but obviously if you're searching for convenience, you can just go to a bookstore and here, voila, where it is.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I would go with secondhand first, but look for the coursework first and see how many times they actually reference a textbook, and then go from there. You might end up saving yourself thousands of dollars every year because you're not buying every book at its latest edition and the newest publishing. So
Depending on the university, I know with UTS and UCID, the census date is, I think, week 4. And that's the last day when you are locked into that subject, and you can't cancel, and you would have already paid for it, basically. Maybe spend that first 3 or 4 weeks deciding if that is the right subject for you. Depending on which degree you're doing, when I did computer engineering, there were very few subjects to choose from. It was very rigid. But if you're doing a course like computer science, like Bachelor of Commerce or Arts or something like that, it tends to be quite flexible and there's a lot of choices. So if you choose something and it's not great, don't go out and rush to buy a textbook first. If anything, see if you can ask around for older students.
we are running a program called House Buddy where we're trying to match someone who might newly arrived with someone who's been here for a year or two. And if we can find you a match with someone who's studying in the same subject, same course, or same uni, then he or she would be in a much better place to tell you whether this is a good investment or not, or whether there's a better subject to choose, etc.
And certainly on the other side of that as well, I've tutored at UTS, and one of the things I found with some of the subjects is I tutored interaction design at the time, and sometimes you'll get students who come along who have had very little understanding of what it was about. And after 1 or 2 lessons of those, they've just disappeared. So quite often, it's not enough to just read the subject outline on the website and make a lot of financial decisions, i.e. buying textbooks, before you really understand what you're getting into. Moving on to the next category, swipe. Manage your money, number 16. Create a budget spreadsheet. Now, a basic spreadsheet can help you think through everything you need to pay for so that there are no surprises. In an ideal scenario, you have a list of what you expect to spend on, and then you match it against the actuals because you're here often by yourself, right? Or you might have some friends and maybe some distant relatives, but your parents are not here. So being able to manage that is very important.
Most international students I met already had a go at looking at budgets before they depart. Whether it's with your friends and family before you go there, maybe you came through a recruitment agent and they gave you a template to have a think. I think that's a good starting point. And then what you find out once you've landed is whether there's any discrepancies between what you thought was the cost of certain things and how much it actually cost. Because I can
Yes.
tell you, even between Sydney and Melbourne, there's a different ballgame. Sydney and Perth and Adelaide would be completely different. Even Sydney and Newcastle would be a different thing. So
Yeah.
it's like it kind of depends on your own spending habit. Where do you live, and also what do you like to do. Some people are very frugal by nature. Others are like, well, I want to experience a few things and whatnot. So the key point here is if you haven't had the opportunity to even sit down and write down what are some of the regular expenses that you need to incur, do it sooner rather than later so that you know how much kind of room you got to move. What we don't want to see, obviously, is international student who came here thinking that they've got 6 months of funds that they can do to survive here, and then once they arrive, they realize everything is double what they thought it was, and then all of a sudden you're kind of in panic mode whilst you're trying to get study underway. You're panicking about getting a job because otherwise you're going to run out of money in 3 months or 2 months. That's not what we want to see. But again, I think on the budget side, starting with the bare minimum to know where you stand and how much money you've got left is a mature move. But cost of living still pretty high.
Yeah.
And when I say cost of living, I'm not talking about buying bubble tea every second day.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like literally buying milk and eggs, or at least in Australian terms, milk, egg, and bread are kind of the three staple things that most household would get, and that kind of determines whether things are getting more and more and more expensive.
Yeah, yeah. Not to mention electricity and water and whatever other utilities that you may have to pay for. You can potentially look on, for example, Google Maps. You can look at some smaller restaurants and just get a sense of, or cafe, just to get a sense of like, oh, okay, it costs about 15, 20, $25 in this area for a meal.
Yeah.
You can look at a lot of supermarket websites like Coles or Woolworths, online stores, to get a sense of like, oh, okay, it's roughly this much money.
Yeah, look, I'm sure some of the more established student programs will actually give you some templates to work with. Because again, if you have never lived by yourself before, it's a question mark. If you've never been to Australia before, it's a question mark. So that's something there. Something I forgot to mention, I can go quite quickly around this. If you're not sure how to track your own expenses, there are a lot of apps, and even some bank would provide it now with their online banking functionality, where it takes all of your transactions in the past period of time and then spit out, here's how much you've spent on this category. Right.
Yep,
And
yep.
that's a good starting point, because it kind of goes, oh, that's what I've been doing the last 2 or 3 months. Let's look at the next 2 or 3 months and see where I can cut back.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Moving on, next category is arrival logistics. By the way, this article will be put in the description. Will be linked in the description, and also, I believe I've also written an article about budgeting, so I'm going to put that in the description as well. I think there's a link to a sample spreadsheet for you to check out and download a copy of. Number 22 is locate essential services. Now, if you live next to a university, it might be a little easier because universities tend to attract a lot of different essential services. If you live a little further out, let's say you decided that you wanted to live by 5-10 Ks, so that you're taking a bus in, or you're taking maybe you're walking to the train station and then taking a train to Central Station and then walking to UTS, USyd, or then taking a bus to UNSW. Wherever you live, it would be good to get a sense of, from where you live, how long does it take to walk to the shops, post office, bank, we mentioned earlier, medical center. If you can live somewhere ideally where you can walk to all of those things in 5, 10, 15 minutes, that would definitely make your life a lot easier and save you a lot of time.
if you can find, I'll say, 2 types of shopping centers near you, you should be okay. There's usually big shopping centers like Westfields and Vicinity and Stocklands, where it's pretty much got everything. And then after that, there might be some local shops in another direction near you, where it's literally got a small business of everything as well. So there's a small supermarket, there's a small butcher, there's a small seafood shop. That proximity is enough for most things. But if you want to do one big shop, or basically do once a week shop, you go to the shopping center and get it done. And that's where really most of the transport hub would be as well, because they're all linked at the shopping centers.
Absolutely. And also, it's worth looking at, for example, the train map, network map, and also the bus routes to see where they are. So let's imagine you like a particular suburb, let's say around the Burwood area, and you wanted to live there. Well, how long does it take to get a bus into, let's say, Sydney Uni? Or what about a train, right? What if you needed to go home later at night because you went out with your friends, or maybe you studied late? But then there's, as Vic was saying earlier, there's a premium to living next to a larger hub. And don't forget that also the public transport, at least as far as trains concerned, they will charge you, I think the maximum is $50 a week, because international students don't get the concession. Yeah, there's no student concessions for international students. So it's going to cost you $50 a week, meaning that if you want to look further out and you're saving $50 of rent, well, that's going to be paid into transport anyway. So maybe it's worthwhile just living a little closer. Moving on to accommodation and bills. This is number 24. Buy bedding and kitchen essentials. Often, as a starting point, if you go to places like Kmart and Target, and for smaller items, Daiso, they're pretty good for most things as a starting point.
I'm we might have a different opinion.
Sure,
So
yeah.
I think the question you need to ask you is, what kind of accommodation are you living at, and how long do you intend to stay there? Like if you're at a student accommodation, I'll say most of the furniture would be provided to you,
Yes.
and therefore what you're looking for are actually personal items, maybe organization and storage units, and that's about it. And for those things, sure, like the Kmart and the Targets would do your job for now. I'm a bit of a fan of IKEA because I love interior design, but again, they're not a sponsor. So, I just find that by having somewhere that shows you what things look like, it probably gives you a better idea of what you need to get and what you don't need to get, so you don't end up creating more kind of landfill and waste and whatnot. I think if your starting point is your student accommodation, then you just need storage and some basic necessities. So most shopping center will have it. If you're looking at share housing, that's usually where I see most of the international students go to places like IKEA or Fantastic Furniture, because they're literally moving out for the first time, and they're trying to go, okay, well, we didn't have to buy a bed before, now we need a bed when you go somewhere. But again, if it was me living in a student kind of budget, my first place to go to is actually Facebook Marketplace or Gumtree, because the good thing would be, I guess, if there's new students coming to Australia, they're probably students who have finished and are going to go home, either for the summer break or permanently because they finished their degree. And that's where you kind of find the most frugal or cost-effective solution, because they're trying to get rid of things and you're happy to take them.
Yeah.
You just need some people power, maybe get a few friends of yours and help out, and then go from there. Assess how long you want to use those items, but I can tell you, other than for secondhand goods, which is actually quite popular and widely accepted in Australia, there's no such thing as, oh, you're using someone else's hand-me-downs or old stuff and therefore you're cheap. Well, no, it's actually a lot of people do it because they don't want to create more landfill. Other people do it because they actually want better quality stuff that they can't get at full price.
Yes.
All these are good reasons, and Australians love secondhand goods. So,
And prices are going up, so getting something secondhand, that is often less than half price.
yeah.
Moving on. Legal and compliance. Swipe, here's a list of all the things, and we're looking at number 29. Check out the part-time work rules. So a few things to consider. One is it applies to all international students. If you're working during holiday breaks, so outside of your study hours, you can work unlimited hours. That's my understanding. I had a look at the website. I mean,
I would say it's best to check the website because those policies do change from time to time.
As of the recording of today, that is the case, but it may have changed depending on when you watch this. And one thing that I think is worth noting is I've heard a few, I think you told me a few bad stories. Employers are not able to cancel visas even if you have breached your visa conditions. So if you find yourself in a workplace where they're trying to get you to work more hours, or you don't want to do it, and then they try to threaten you in some way, then you can actually contact the Fair Work Ombudsman, OMBUDSMAN, and they can actually help you deal with those sorts of situations. It's unfortunate, let's be clear, most small businesses are just people trying to make a living, but occasionally you get someone who's really trying to exploit students, and under such circumstances, your visa is not at risk from whatever their demands are.
I'm going to say that this is a pretty big topic, so I'm sure we'll dive into it a bit later.
Yeah.
But I think the mature thing would be know your rights and what you should and shouldn't do. And if you're not sure, before reaching out to the Ombudsman, there's also one of our partners called Justice Connect. New South Wales government's been funding them to provide, I guess, some legal advice and recommendations for international students on what are their options should they come to possible legal matter.
So that's a not-for-profit.
That's a not-for-profit. So that's a not-for-profit organization funded by the New South Wales government to provide free legal advice to international students like yourself. We can share the link somewhere on the description. But if you have any questions around there, especially around, you know, rental issues and employment issues, probably the top two, they would be the ones to call. But obviously, if you want to do your own research, I'm sure it's on their website somewhere. So, but we'll come back to this a bit later because I think it will be good for everyone to know, you know, what are some of the potential risks involved in working here. But I think generally speaking, like Vincent said, most people try to do the right thing. But it's one of those things that you want to know where you can go if something does go wrong
Yeah.
before it happens. So
Yeah, yeah. The way that I've heard someone explain it to me is the law is not this hammer that you try to hit someone with. Rather, you try to work things out between people, whether it's as a tenant or whether it's as an employee or between friends and whatnot. And worst case scenario, if you can't resolve it, Justice Connect becomes a third party that can help guide you through what your rights are and what that process is if you need to take it further. Moving on to social and cultural connection. Number 33, practicing English. Practicing English in this context, we would recommend that you do so in some sort of a language exchange program or something similar. A lot of our volunteer programs, Welcome Desk, the Buddy Program, and so on, does help you try your hand at practicing more English and gives you a more, I think, a safer environment so that you don't feel embarrassed if you say something wrong or it doesn't quite make sense, because everyone knows, hey, look, we're all international students here. We're all trying to help each other out. Maybe you should try saying it this way or that way.
I'm not particularly good in linguistics myself, so I think in a way by facilitating different volunteering programs or student activities, it just creates a really good reason for you to practice something in order to communicate and work with other people. So I see it as more we're creating that need. Everyone's there to meet friends, to not be judgmental about each other's English because we're all just equally good or bad at it. And therefore, over time, that will help you kind of fine tune your English level, at least have a conversational level. I think it would be expected. It will definitely help you kind of settle into Australia as well. So, if a volunteering event and you come in there for 4 to 6 hours is the way to go, then that's great. If you want to get to know someone over a longer period of time, that's where the buddy program comes in. So by interacting with your buddy, then by logic you're actually practicing English as well. And also there's a lot of times when conversational English and textbook English are different things. So I always say, look, the whole point of communication is to be able to communicate, even if you're heavily accented or you're using the wrong word, so to speak. If the other person gets what you're doing and are present and interacting with you, I think that's the main goal. After that, I'm sure with more practice you're going to get to a certain level, wherever that might be. So.
Moving on. Safety and emergency preparedness. Number 37, on-campus security services. Every university has one after hours. You can find it on their website, and they will tell you where they'll gather, who to contact, and they will often come and pick you up and drop you off where you live, I believe, as long as within a certain range. But certainly they do have these services. And part of the reason for that is because you're new and you don't know anyone and you don't speak the language, you're an easier target. And that's something that the universities are very conscious of, and they don't want anything bad to happen to anyone. So especially at night. So having on-campus security is really helpful.
The campus itself is almost like a public ground.
Yes.
Like anyone from the general public can walk in and out. And I know whilst during broad daylight there's thousands of you walking everywhere. At night time and the evening classes, it tends to get quieter. So just, be aware of your surroundings. And when in doubt, I'm pretty sure most of the uni campuses have security cameras and phones that you can pick up and call someone if you need help. straight away. I'm not sure about the whole picking you up from campus and dropping you off somewhere. That sounds like a very exclusive and possibly expensive
Oh,
service.
on campus security, yeah. Yeah, they have these like little buses and things like that. So whichever university or college you go to, check their website. Universities have different policies.
Sure. Anyway, but I think it's just being conscious about safety and your surroundings.
Yes, yes.
There are certainly suburbs within Sydney and New South Wales that you might want to be more careful and more attentive to those around you. But on campus, I think, like Vincent said, the intention is to make you aware that yes, there are people who know that you are new and you don't know anyone and don't really know anything about Sydney, and they might take advantage of that. But is it the general public or is it the majority? No, absolutely not. So it's
The numbers of these sorts of incidences are small, but when it happens to someone, word travels around and then everyone becomes much more stressed out by that. Also, it's worth noting that travel in groups if you can. Another reason to get to know people, friends, housemates, etc. Moving on, we've got 3 more to go. Let's go through these very quickly. Long-term planning and career. This is number 41. Update your resume. Not necessarily something that you're probably looking to do now, considering you just arrived, but keep in your mind. Often, when you go and apply for work, people are going to ask you beyond where you went and what qualification you got. They may ask, what have you done? What are the things that you have achieved? So if you keep that in the back of your mind, joining, whether it's volunteering or whether it's side projects or things like that, those can often make your resume stand out more compared to people who purely stuck to academics. Depending on what sort of work you're doing. If you're looking to get into specific research in that area, then of course you should know that better than anyone else. But if you're looking to go out into industry and you're looking to find work, more often than not, employers are very pragmatic about that. So being able to say, hey, look, here is a problem I encountered, this is how I resolved it, and this is the need that I met or the value that I delivered. That can often be very helpful and to keep in the back of your mind as you build up your resume and portfolio.
As an employer, what you're really looking for from someone who's of a young age is whether or not they can stick to a commitment, they can turn up on time, whether they can handle some basic tasks in accordance to how you want them to do it. So I think volunteering itself is an act of those things, but obviously in an unpaid manner. So if you can show that you do turn up on time, you can be responsible for certain things, it will be factored in from a potential employer on whether they can rely on you to do your job, and that's kind of the most basic need from an employer.
In a way, it's like a practice run.
Yeah.
So if you think about, academic studies is one level, and then doing group projects or, a term-long capstone, and then doing volunteering, and then maybe some sort of an internship, and then finally you get to that point, then it makes more sense for someone to hire you. Moving on, travel and exploration. Google Maps is pretty big in Australia, and there's another one that I've checked out here and there called City Mapper. But generally, Google Maps is more than enough for you to use to look for public transport, how long does it take to get there, how do you get there, that sort of thing.
Yeah, a few years ago they've formed a partnership with New South Wales Transport. So Google Maps would now actually have options for you to go via car, cycling, and of course public transport. And it's all for 3 forms of public transport as well. So trains/light rail, ferries, buses.
Yeah.
It will tell you different options, different costs, and if there's high traffic or delays, it will also tell you real time. So it's what I know most Australians are using at the moment to find a way around.
And finally, Australian power adapters. We're a little different from a lot of Asian countries. Just keep that in mind. A lot of the equipment that you bring here, your laptop, your phone, things like that, you may need at least one universal adapter because I think a lot of the apartments we have here, they're only really catered to the Australian sort of what I call the kind of like the surprise face of the, angled eyebrows and the open mouth in the middle.
Look, I think most students would probably bring an adapter. Whether or not you've brought enough is a different conversation. But I'll say this: I've seen plenty of people who try to twist whatever appliances you've got
Yeah.
to fit the smiley face or frowning face that Vincent puts it. Please don't. Like it's fire risk. We've had quite a few incidents in recent years of fire hazards and whatnot. So it's only a couple of dollars. You're gonna use this for a very long time. Let's just get some legitimate appliances and go from there.
And also, Australian standards for electrical devices tends to be quite high. So you'd rather buy something in Australia more often than not. We have a list of all 50 provided in the link, but we've just covered some of these. And so feel free to check out the article. We've already done a whole bunch of call to action. So maybe let's not do another call to action, except drink water and breathe air, because Australian air is really nice.
I was going to say check out the articles, but sure.
Yes, also check out the articles, but keep breathing. It's good for you. I'm not a doctor. That's not medical advice. All right.